First of all, it's such a joy to see you in 3 dimensions again. That's really very good. So I came here to inform you about our plans for a transition from FM to DAB+ in Germany. And I hope at the end of my presentation you will see that the transition is feasible and how. The next slide comes from the courtesy of Bayerische Landeszentrale für neue Medien and my colleague Veit Olischläger, the head of the regulation for private stations in Bavaria, and it shows the comparison of the FM costs of local radio stations in Bavaria between DAB in light blue and FM in dark blue. And as you probably know, the distribution area in DAB in many times is larger than the distribution area in FM for the local radio stations in Bavaria. The difference between those 2 columns is even bigger. So we can see that distribution costs really matter for local radio stations, and I will come to the aspect of the distribution costs of a public broadcaster as Bayerischer Rundfunk is later. The distribution costs and the FM prices will even get worse in the near future, we expect, because the electricity costs will rise. And you all know digital radio, DAB, is much more efficient than FM, and this is also a question, of course, of sustainability. We also are threatened by massive reinvestments for overaged FM stations. I will come to that later, but for a public broadcaster like me, it's really massive costs that we are threatened for. The fees for the FM frequencies are expected to rise in the near future. The Frequency Authority has announced a rise of the fees, and the transmitter sites often belong to the Deutsche Funkturm, which is a company of Deutsche Telekom formerly, and which was sold some weeks ago to an American investor who is likely to increase the rent then. So the costs are increasing, and this is the transmitter network our company runs. We run 5 FM stations and cover about 12 million inhabitants. And as you can see, we have 7 large transmitter sites, really large, and we have quite a lot, 21 very small transmitter sites. And for a network operator, those small transmitter sites are the main problem. They cost quite a lot in the maintenance. Our people have to travel quite a lot over there. And if you compare those costs to the user covered, it's even worse. So what we did was to select those different sites, and it's important to close down a site completely if you want to get rid of the costs. So we selected those sites to those 4 categories, and then asked ourselves, is there already a good DAB coverage? Is there an Autobahn which is necessarily to be covered for a few years with FM? And then we made a plan to switch off. And this is our largest site, the Brotjackel. I'm sure you can't spell it. And we made a switch off in Mittenwald. Mittenwald is a small city in the Alps with about 5,000 inhabitants. We did that together with our partners from the private broadcasting side with Antenne Bayern and Radio Alpenwelle, and we switched it off in April 2021, and we had exactly 2 telephone calls. Mittenwald is perfectly covered by digital radio. We had, of course, some marketing events over there with the local dealers, but it worked exactly perfect. So this made us really optimistic about the future, of course, of the small sites. What we really need from the regulatory side is a solution how to handle decommissioned frequencies. Because if you bring the FM frequencies back into the market, the motor for the digitalization will stop, of course. So we need those agreements, and we just reached a minimum consensus on the federal basis, saying that they can only be used for significant gaps in coverage of existing FM stations. In Bavaria, we are a little bit far. We can come together and talk about frequencies that are given back and make sure that those frequencies will not return into the market. But that's, of course, crucial. For the public broadcasting system, the situation is a little bit more complicated, as always in public broadcasting. We have made a prediction on how our transmitter costs will develop until 2030. And as you can see, the green line, which is the increase of the DAB costs, and the blue line, the decrease of the FM costs. And we made the prediction, and that's quite exact, that the DAB costs in the end will reach about 80% of the FM costs by doubling the number of radio stations that we broadcast. So our financing body, the so-called KEF, the Commission to calculate the public broadcasting fee in Germany, they said, well, we add the costs for the transmission in DAB with the costs for the transmission in FM, making the black line, and we want to have the black line on the level of 2029 by only DAB. This is, of course, a big challenge for us, and I don't think this will happen, but I'm quite sure we can work on it with the way I showed before. Of course, not in a big switch-off event. I don't think that's likely, but step by step, and more important, region by region. But then you will see that it will increase the speed as soon as the listeners, our audience, understand that FM will not be there forever. So I'm quite optimistic, and I hope I could show you a little bit on how we plan to do that in the next years. Thank you very much.